Stick with mobile and talk about taxis. As mentioned, GrabTaxi is one of the various apps that you can use in order to hail a cab. And by the way, if that doesn't work, you can always talk to Russell at the front counter and he'll call one for you. But how do you take a local brand and develop it regionally? That's the subject of our next presentation. The Global VP of Marketing at GrabTaxi, Cheryl Goh.
Okay, thanks. Okay. Let me just get the clicker. So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for having me here. If you missed it, my name is Cheryl, and I'm from GrabTaxi. And today I'll be speaking about how we've grown and scaled GrabTaxi across the region and some of our key experiences as we scale across the region, right? So it's very hard to see, but before I begin, can I just get a show of hands of people who have heard of GrabTaxi? Okay, great.
Maybe it would be easier to ask, who hasn't heard of GrabTaxi?
So I'm sure all of you have internet, mobile internet, and if you have time, try Googling this phrase, right? Google the phrase, world's worst taxi. And we all know that Google doesn't lie, right? And according to Google, Malaysia is famous besides having the Twin Towers, besides having a national carrier that's going through some really turbulent times. Malaysia is also famous for having really, really bad taxi drivers. Our taxi drivers has put us on the map, and it's really how GrabTaxi started. We're actually, we started in Malaysia, and we started because it was really just so bad taking taxis, and we felt that surely this couldn't be the way. Surely there's something that we can do about it to make this better, right? And so our mission, we started June 2012, and our mission was really simple. It was really about making taxis fast, safe, and certain, and that's it, right? And so when we started, it was really just about making public transportation a lot more accessible and easy in Malaysia. But then as we looked at it and we looked harder, we realized that it was something that was needed across Southeast Asia. And when we started, it was really, really difficult. It's very hard to tell a taxi driver in Malaysia or in Bangkok or in Philippines, hey, please use the meter. And it's even harder when you tell them, and you also need to have a smartphone and a data plan, right? But we kept pushing, and over time, when we attained enough critical mass, we were able to then tell drivers that the shape of your rice bowl now is a mobile phone. And today, we've expanded all across the region. We're actually in 6 Southeast Asian countries. So that's all our business is Southeast Asia. We're in 19 cities. So in some countries, we're in 4 cities or more. So we've done all right. I think we have the largest fleet in the region, 70,000 vehicles, which means more than 70,000 drivers, because like in countries like Indonesia or Philippines, there's shift, so drivers share cars. We're in, as I mentioned, many cities. 3.6 app downloads, which isn't a lot, but if you compare the games, but we're a utility app. And 6.3 bookings per second. Between 2013 and 2014, we actually grew 10 times. And so many people don't know this, but in Southeast Asia, we're actually dominant #1, and we're #1 in every single country that we're in, whether or not we're the first mover, whether or not there's a global player, right? And we're #1 in terms of all metrics, for example, network of cars, drivers, bookings. We've also diversified out of our taxi portfolio. We have taxis in 6 countries, unmarked cars or private cars in 4, and we also have bikes in Vietnam to sort of like suit the local market. So a lot of people ask us, how does a small, tiny startup from Malaysia compete against the likes of Uber, of Halo, And I think for us, the difference between us and any other global company is that global companies have a global strategy, which they then try to localize and make relevant. For us, we started out as a local company, as a Southeast Asian company, and we have always been focused on being extremely hyper-local. And we look at everything from a local lens, and not just from a local Southeast Asian lens, but from a local Filipino lens, or Malaysian lens, or Singapore lens. So let me give you an example. We're hyperlocal in our purpose, right? The reason we exist. And so in countries like Malaysia and Philippines, where safety is a big issue, that's what we spend our time, and that's what we judge ourselves by. So our app helps us make taxi rides safer. We're the first in the world to actually develop a tracker. So if you get into a taxi, you can actually share your ride or track your ride, send it to someone or through social media, and people can actually click on it and watch you move and also know who is your driver. And that helps keep you safe. But beyond that, beyond what we do with the app, I think what's more important is what we do offline. So we're very strict with driver checks. We don't allow any online sign-up of drivers because that means we never meet them. And in some countries, we do things like random house visits. We require letters from the police for you to be part of our network. But in Singapore, that's very different, right? In Singapore, I think it's safe. People use the meter. It's more a question of efficiency, and that's where we try very hard, you know. So I think Singapore was one of the fastest countries that we scaled up in terms of driver network, because we know that people in Singapore just want a taxi. They always say, I like it fast, I like it now. So we're the largest network of taxis in this country with the fastest response time. So if you use our app anywhere else, actually, the ticker counts down a bit slower, but Singapore is one of the fastest for several reasons. So besides that, we're also very hyperlocal in the way that we operate. So like, for example, driver recruitment. Every country that we do it, we actually do it very differently. In Malaysia, for example, we actually will go to petrol stations because most drivers pump natural gas, and that's how we do driver recruitment. We go to the stations and we recruit them. Whereas in Vietnam, where drivers are really hungry and they have no time to talk to you, the only way we can recruit drivers is if we pay for the fare, get into their car, and then sort of like talk to them, right? Also as a brand, you know, we love exceeding expectations, and how we do that is very different from country to country. So in Malaysia, we realize most people actually drive. Working class, they tend to drive, they have their own vehicles. And the only time that they take a taxi is when they go to the airport. And this is that moment where we really need to exceed their expectation. So if you book a taxi in Malaysia using advanced booking, that means the day before, we will always, 100% of all advanced bookings, we actually call the driver to give them a morning call. And then 1 hour before the driver is supposed to arrive at your house, we call him, and if we can't reach him, we replace the driver for you automatically. And then we call the passenger at the time he's supposed to get in the taxi to make sure he also woke up. And this is kind of how, you know, we exceed expectations in a very hyperlocal way. The other thing about us is I think we've made a lot of good decisions because we place a lot of emphasis on data, but not just big data or small data and all these data stuff. We actually look at things which are actionable because you know, there are a lot of vanity metrics, you know, numbers that always go up. For example, number of downloads, number of people on my Facebook. No matter what, these numbers will continue to go up, but it doesn't really tell me much. So what? So what if I have 1 million, 10 million people on my Facebook, especially if I paid for it? So for us, when it comes to data, we're very straightforward. We focus on just one metric that matters. And for us, that is actually the number of successful rides that we have, because it's a function of passengers who want to ride and also the number of drivers accepting the job. And it's a very good way of understanding the health of our organization. And of course, that's not the only number that we look at. We look at that number and we look at everything that impacts it. But I think what's important is, at least if we know rides is what matters, we know that, for example, if downloads grow, but rides don't grow, whatever we're doing with downloads doesn't work. So I think it's always important to know what are you growing across the funnel and what's the ultimate goal, because it's really easy to grow stuff that doesn't sort of like derive the results that you want. So let me give you an example. This is a game, and obviously if you are familiar with games, they generally look for, you know, the metric that you kind of actually want to measure is number of active users or number of active paying users. But I guess for this example, the designer, the person in charge was saying, get me the most number of downloads. So he came up with this. It's a medieval game, and it converted so-so. So he thought, okay, I shall add 2 girls. And these 2 girls should help me increase my downloads. And of course, it does, right? And it says, great. I will now add more cleavage and add more interesting copy. Help save the queen. And, So my point basically is that it's very easy to drive conversions. But if you're not driving the right conversion, you're actually doing a really bad job as a marketer. So here are some examples where data pointed us in the right direction. So this is an actual ad that we released when we launched in Indonesia. And when I saw it, I was like, oh my God, that's awful. GrabTaxi, book taxi, faster, safer, and more reliable. It's just bad in every way possible. And I asked them, can you please take this down? But it was actually the top performing ad in Indonesia. So it ran for quite a while. Also, I think how we knew that Malaysia tries to overperform and exceed expectations when it comes to taxi rides going to the airport, because we looked at this and we realized that this was really that opportunity. So we have a lot of campaigns to the airport. We have like almost free. We work with people like AirAsia. We have Groupon coupons. All of this just to drive airport usage, because when we track users after that, if they never used this before, but they have a very good airport experience, they're 30% more likely to use us for short rides and city rides. And lastly, I think one thing that makes us really different from a lot of people, a lot of our global competitors, is we really started with a social mission. And it's something that's still very strong in us. And our social mission, we have 2 consumers, 2 people that we really care about. One is our drivers and one is our passengers, right? And we really focus on improving the standard of living for passengers, for drivers. So if you drive with us, you're likely to see an increase in income. And that's because we have a lot of passengers on our network today, and so it's a lot easier to get passengers. You also spend a lot less time and petrol, because we send you the closest job. So less time, less petrol wastage. And we're also the gateway to the internet for a lot of drivers. Before us, there was really no point getting a smartphone with a data plan. But because now you can make money, we're a gateway for the internet for them. We teach them how to use Waze. We teach them how to use GPS. And of course, on their own, they'll learn how to download porn. But, we also focus on the passenger side, safer rides for women, don't drink and drive, and pay the regulated rate. So these are some of the campaigns that we do across the region. We're very big on anti-drunk driving. If you don't realize it already, that's actually me in that poster. It says, if you start to look sexy, book a taxi. So I always say, you work in a startup when you write your own copy, star in your own ad, and do your own makeup. Besides that, we also use our network of taxis to do a lot of other cool things. For example, there was a typhoon in Philippines, Haiyan, right? And there was a lot of devastation, and we use our taxis. We told them we'll pay for any ride for anyone that's sending goods to the Red Cross. And it was amazing. I don't have pictures, but this is something that we did for orphanages. We target 2,000 toys. We actually got 18. So people generally want to contribute. You just need to make it easy for them. And we are also very big on drivers. We launched this year Employee Provident Fund for Singapore taxi drivers. So they don't get a lot of benefits, but we put them in place if they are top drivers. And we're rolling this out regionally. We also have Family Day. This is kind of like, it's very heartfelt because a lot of drivers, they don't get this kind of benefits. We also do free healthcare and health checks. So, I think as a company with a strong social impact, we've had many, many benefits. Like we have a strong team that loves what we do. We get to partner with big organizations. We get a lot of media love, and we have a lot of fans. And all of this equals to financial gains, ultimately. So just to wrap up, 3 things that I think we've done really well that has helped us compete at a global scale. Number one, we're hyper-local. We look at the problem and we really deliver a solution that is just right for the country that we're in. Number two, we look at data and we let it guide our decisions. We don't let our decisions be clouded by egos and feelings. And lastly, we're a company with a really strong social mission, and we think about how we leave the world a better place than when we first found it. And that's it. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. The aptly dressed Cheryl Goh. I notice you're wearing the brand colours today. Any questions for Cheryl? Yes, sir. We'll get the microphone to you. Was that really you in that poster, Cheryl?
Yes, it was.
Thank you. I was just curious, how do you distinguish your promotions from Uber?
I think it depends, but in general, we really look. So we have a different model. We generally use taxis. And I think that, and
Doesn't Uber generally use taxis?
Only in Singapore, right. So I think for us, our incentives is really dependent on which side of the market we're struggling with. So for example, in Singapore, it's primarily on the driver side. There's really a lot of people that know GrabTaxi that want to get a taxi, but there's not enough drivers. So our incentives are focused on getting more drivers during peak hours, during shift change. Whereas in other countries, like say Vietnam, taxis are considered luxury. And there's really a lot of taxis. If you go to Vietnam, you stand at the side of the road with luggage, the taxi will cross 4 roads to try and get to you, right? And in those kind of markets, we look at subsidizing more on the passenger side. So, I mean, I think that's how we look at promotions. We don't necessarily look at how Uber does their promotions and say, okay, how do we be different? We look at what the market needs and how do we shape sort of consumer behavior, be it on the driver and passenger side, and we kind of formulate our promotions based on those.
Very good. Thank you very much indeed. Any other questions? All right. I think Cheryl's got to go and grab a taxi. Thank you very much, Cheryl Goh.